We were last week. Where's my scribe? Where did we finish up? Chapter 22, verse 17. All right, let me just go back a little bit and sum up, just kind of take us up. Genesis 22 is thematic for restitution. The word for restitution in Hebrew is shalom. Shalom, S-H-A-L-A-M. Pretty close to shalom, isn't it? Because when you've made restitution, you have peace. And so God clearly established that restitution would bring, once restitution was made, you should then release it. There shouldn't be any unforgiveness. I've offended you, I've done something, I've made restitution, that settles the matter, and now you can have peace. So once you have rendered shalom, you can then receive shalom. So very close, one letter off in the Hebrew. So a very important concept. God talks us all throughout Genesis 22 about restitution. And as he begins to set up the structure and the foundation for the law, for the governing rules and regulations of our life. And we talked about this last week, and I talked about it for a while, that those of you that say I'm not under the law, I ask you to raise your hand if you've ever heard that, and everybody raised their hand. Then I asked you who were homeowners, and you raised your hand. I said, okay, in your home, you have your home defined, your property defined with 4 stakes, one on each corner, which defines your property line. They said, that's correct. So well, that's biblical. And without that biblical foundation that God established that the borders of a field should be marked with a stone, and that would establish the law of property boundaries. Now, how many of you are not under the law? And nobody raised their hand, because we all are under a certain kind of law. Now, in this concept of restitution, the difference between law and grace, clearly defined within the biblical concept of law, is that under law, I must seek out restitution in every matter. Okay? You've offended me, you now must make restitution, I receive it, and the matter is settled. Under grace, you offend me, you commit a crime against me, I have the option of taking it out. I also have the option of releasing you and forgiving you by grace. Freely I was forgiven, freely I should forgive. Freely I received, freely I should give. And therefore, under grace, under the new covenant concepts of operating in a community, I now have the option to say, I forgive you. You don't have to pay me back. Don't worry about it. Okay? That's the difference between being under the law and saved by grace. Okay? The law doesn't save us. Obedience to the law doesn't save us. But to say that I don't have rights, you still have rights. As a believer, you have legal rights. You're not waiving your legal rights. None of you, when you accepted the Lord, say, I now relinquish my right to receive restitution. I now relinquish my right. But what does it say? It says if 2 believers have a situation and you're on your way to the courthouse, settle your matter before you get to the courthouse. Otherwise, you become judged by the law of man, man's law, as opposed to God's economy of grace. And so we have this which is applicable to all of us. Every one of us have these boundaries. When you have somebody build a fence on your property, you have the option of having a surveyor come and making a new plat and giving up those 3 feet. Right, and not making it a big deal and going to have new markers put down and just saying, you know what, take it. It doesn't bother me. I wasn't going to use that 3 feet. It's not a big deal. Or you can go sue them and make them go through the expense of having the fence moved. So they paid $5,000 for the fence. They're going to pay $5,000 to have it moved. And now what do you have? You have an unhappy, angry neighbor for the rest of the time you live there. And if it gets really bad, you get really uncomfortable, then you decide you want to move. And in today's marketplace, you move, you sell your house for less than you paid for it, it cost you $20,000, and guess what happened? You don't make the connection in your mind that you came against that person and cost him $10,000. Oh, it's a bad economy, but let me tell you, in God's divine justice, he wants matters settled. He wants people to release other people. This bitterness and this bitter root of offense is clearly established. Yes, you have the right to be offended. You have the right to sue somebody. You have the right to establish your boundaries. But you also have the right, when somebody transgresses against you, to forgive them. That's the freedom in Messiah that you now have that you didn't have before. Everybody was out to mete out restitution, and God clearly tells us what defines restitution. Now, compensatory damages, excess damages, emotional pain and suffering, all these things that he puts, that mankind has applied to this, isn't in God's economy. He says, if you lose an animal, replace the animal and pay for the work that was lost. If you lose this, if you lose an eye, pay with an eye. All right? But don't pay with an eye and $10,000 and 4 years in prison and all this stuff. The punishment should fit the crime. Restitution should be made in accordance with the amount which was lost. So if you can't harvest your field, whatever your crops you sold them for last year, plus a small increase, you should get for this year. That's it. And oh, by the way, while you can't harvest your crops, what are you doing? Well, might as well take a vacation. Go use the time wisely in God's economy, and you actually have been giving something above and beyond if you take the right approach and the right attitude. But if your heart is set on punishment and on vengeance, God clearly says, vengeance is mine. He says, if you'll feed your enemy, if you'll pray for those that despitefully use you, it's like heaping hot coals on their head. God gives us the power and the authority to walk in love and let Him do His job. And if you take a look at the entire structure of offense, when we come to the Day of Atonement, we have Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. For the 10-day period in between Rosh Hashanah and the Jewish New Year, you have a period called the Days of Awe for making reconciliation with man. You become reconciled with your enemies. So when you bring your gift to the altar on the Day of Atonement for the national forgiveness of Israel, for the national not for your individual, but for the national, you come together as a body in agreement, one voice, and He's already told us at Babel, if we do this in one voice, nothing will be impossible for us. Therefore, what day should all of Israel be saved? On the Day of Atonement. And you remember, Yeshua said, if you bring your gift to the altar and thereby realize you have that somebody has something against you, leave your gift and go be reconciled to your brother. Reconciliation is an important part of our relationship with God. And so even though it's structured that sacrifices were made for guilt offerings and sin offerings to God, what did I do on a daily basis to receive reconciliation from you as an individual? And you've seen people that have a great relationship with God, but they don't get along with anybody. How does that work? I know a lot of really angry pastors. They'll bite your head off. Don't bother me, I'm a holy man. Don't bother me, I'm in prayer. Don't bother me, I'm in preparation. Don't bother me, don't bother me. I got all these people around me to keep you from bothering me. Yeah, you're called to be a shepherd. You're supposed to be bothered. You make your living being bothered. You should be more tolerant than anybody else about being bothered. Not the least tolerant, the most tolerant. Okay? Okay, you got sheep. Right? That's what it's called to do. So we have these rules and regulations that lay out a very strong foundation of what restitution looks like. And now we come to how we should live our lives. And it says you should not tolerate a sorceress. So Dionne Warwick. Isn't she the Psychic Friends Network? Wasn't that where she was? Wasn't that what it was? Okay, Psychic Friends Hotline. Right? Don't tolerate a sorceress. Means if you have somebody practicing divination, tarot card reading, Ouija boards, consorting with spirits, the dead people, channeling, telling you what Uncle Fred just said. Okay? Don't tolerate it. Now, there's many other scriptures and translations that talk about killing, stoning, beating, rejecting. It just says don't tolerate it. Okay? However it is that you don't tolerate it, handle it. But have nothing to do with it. It's an abomination before God. Why is it an abomination before God? Puts it above God. Okay? Who talks to the dead? God. Means I have to be on a par with God to be able to talk to all things He created. Do you have dominion over death? We do not have dominion over death. We can defeat death through Messiah and have eternal life, but it's not because of our power and authority. It's because of His power and authority, because of His shed blood, not because of our shed blood. Belief in our own shed blood, if I believe in my shed blood, I'm dead. Doesn't make any sense. But if I believe in His shed blood, I have life. And so the life and the power and the authority comes from the belief in His blood. Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. Bestiality. Why would bestiality be such a problem? Of course, we abhor the thought of somebody having sex with an animal, but it's because the idolaters, the pagans, did that. And if you take a look at the origin of things like syphilis, okay, disease that was passed from fornication with sheep, it's its origin. And so this was a shepherd's illness. Okay? But now it's permeated society, and syphilis and gonorrhea and sexually transmitted diseases are on the rise. On the rise, on the increase. Matter of fact, if you drive downtown past the Jefferson County health sign for the health department, it says syphilis and gonorrhea is on the increase, come in to be screened. It's on a billboard. Okay? Don't take it up with me, take it up with Jefferson County. Anybody here with Jefferson County? Well, you used to be, right. Right, you work for the health department, both of you. Well, I have a cure for syphilis. No sex outside of marriage, and she said that they announced to her when they both Linda and Layla worked for the health department and retired from the health department. They told them that in the 60s that they would have a cure for syphilis. I said, I have a cure for syphilis. All right, that's another hand in the back. Josiah. So advertising does work. Well, it's the power of advertising right there at work, and great. So if you want to promote something, put a billboard up. Judy.
Sometimes in the middle of the night, when I'm watching television, I see these women without much clothes on, and they're advertising, meet somebody and just call this number. And to me, that looks like television prostitution, and there's 3 or 4 different groups that do that, and there's one for gay men, and so that might be a good reason why Birmingham is so high in venereal disease if everybody's, with a lot of different people. And the other thing is, it probably hurts God so much that he gave us a beautiful situation with marriage and the family to go and have sex with animals. It's sort of a slap in God's face.
Absolutely. He gave us sex as a beautiful thing within the confines of marriage. He gave it to us to fulfill a prophetic command. Remember, God spoke to Adam and Eve. He said, we created man in our image, both male and female. They are to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. This was the very first Great Commission. This was the Great Commission of man in Genesis, that God said, go out and be fruitful that you may subdue the earth. That's how we know we have dominion and authority. If I've ever been to your house and you have a dog, so I'm looking at Sally, who was just at her house with her dogs. Okay? Do I have dominion and authority over your dogs? I do. Do I have dominion and authority over the dogs in your home? I do. And I tell them, I have dominion over you, leave me alone. Wayne and Diane have a dog that jumps up on everybody, barks, and has never obeyed a single command. And I went to their house and I said, leave me alone, go over there. And the dog walked over there, and they looked and said, who are you? I said, Dr. Doolittle. Rocky.
I heard many, many years ago when AIDS kind of first came to light that it was actually a derivative of a group in Africa that had sex with monkeys.
Joanne. Walter, I have dominion over Walter. I bit him back. I don't mind biting him back. I have dominion over him. Walter's their bird. Okay? When you weren't looking, I showed him a picture of a chicken. on a platter. Walter doesn't bother me anymore. Said, Walter, you want to know what happened to Cousin Fred? All right, verse 19. Whoever sacrifices to a god other than the Lord alone shall be proscribed. What is proscribed? What does it say in your translation? Blotted out. Okay, this is the same kind of blotting out. This is kind of removal. This is the absolute most profound. It's like the blotting out of Haman. It's like the blotting out of the Amalekites. It was in God's instruction. This is a blotting out. Okay, that these people should never be mentioned again as if they never existed. Anybody who sacrifices to other gods. All right, we continue in verse 20. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving on a Sunday morning to our new location. And I saw a man walking. He was in shorts. He was obviously, I saw his vehicle, and he was walking up the street just empty-handed. And I could tell that he was stranded. And he was walking up. There's a Chevron station, a BP station up on our exit. And so I pulled over to ask him if he needed help. And he just kind of looked at me oddly, and he goes, well, I do. I'm out of gas. And I said, do you have a gas can? I'll take you up to the corner. He said, no, I don't have a gas can. And I said, well, they'll sell you one. And so I took him up, and they sold him one. I said, well, let me drive you. He goes, I'll walk back to my car. I said, no, let me drive you back to your car. And so we got to talking, and he was a man who was in the banking business, and he worked for a bank. He was from Dothan, worked for a bank, lost his job in the downsizing, was a mortgage banker, and pretty much his life became unraveled. His marriage failed. He was thrown out. He actually had a restraining order against him. He went into the neighborhood to pick something up to check the mailbox. His ex-wife called. They arrested him. He was thrown in jail for 45 days. And during those 45 days, a prison ministry came to visit with him, prayed with him, rededicated his life to the Lord, and he had been out for 2 days. He was camping at Oak Mountain State Park, was driving to go see a son that he was estranged from, hoping to be reconciled, and his car broke down. So I went and picked him up, and I gave him my card. He got the gas, and he said, you don't have to wait with me. I said, let me wait with you, make sure it gets started, and it wouldn't start. And so I called AAA, and I said it was me, and waited there, and a tow truck took him. And he said he'd be fine, and I towed him over to Lakeshore to the Goodyear store at Lakeshore across from the Walmart. And so I just thought everything was fine. They dropped him off, and I went on about my business, and I actually was meeting somebody for dinner at 5 or had an appointment at 5. And about 4 o'clock, my cell phone rang. And he told me his name, and I didn't recognize his name, but he said, he goes, well, listen, I'm completely stranded. I'm here where they dropped off the car, but I need to get my tent and my sleeping bag and all that stuff from the campsite at Oak Mountain. Would you come get me? And I said, sure. I offered to help you. So I took him, and we packed up my car with all his stuff, and I took him to his car, and I called the police and told them that he was going to be staying there, and please that his car had broken down, that I was the rabbi here, and would they make sure that he was okay to spend the night in the parking lot in his vehicle to just camp out there until the next morning. And after I made the call, he just looked at me with big tears in his eyes, and he goes, people don't help strangers anymore. And I said, well, helping a stranger is very biblical. We were strangers once in the desert ourselves. And he just looked at me, and he said, I've never heard that before. And I said, well, now that you have time to read your Bible. And if you don't have one, I'll be more than happy to give you one out of the trunk of my car. He goes, no, I have my Bible right here. I said, well, go look it up, and it says, you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Now, yes, it was bright daylight. Had it been 10 o'clock at night, had he been dressed all in black, had he, looked like he was bulky, and he was in a T-shirt and a pair of hiking shorts. I guess he could have stabbed me with a nail file. Okay? Or nail clippers, but that's about all he could have carried on him. Okay? The point is we should be kind to strangers. And we have opportunities all the time in Walmart. We have opportunities not in these distress situations, but we have the opportunity in everyday situations. The day of taking somebody's shopping cart and saying, let me take that for you. our past. I see people all the time struggling in their cars, older people struggling to juggle because the shopping cart's about to roll, struggling with something, the trunk falls on them. It's difficult. Okay? It's not as easy to move the older you get. Okay? And I see people perfectly healthy just walking by them, minding their own business. And I think it's wrong. And I think we've lost a part of our compassion. And then you walk over to a car that says, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. Well, you love Jesus, but you don't love anybody else. Okay? The way you love Jesus, the way you love Yeshua is to love other people, to stop. Okay? I'm not that important. And I hate to break the news to you. Neither are you. And in God's economy, we are the same, and He's no respecter of person, and we should not be. We should not be. Okay, you're dressed up, you're in a hurry. What are you in a hurry to do? If it's not God's business and He brings you that angel, He brings you that opportunity to show Him that you really do love Him. Now, for those in the body of Messiah that understand the Jewishness of the Scripture and the New Covenant Scriptures, when Yeshua was talking about whatever you do to the least of these, you did to me, He was talking about the Jewish people. But in a modern-day context, okay, I'm going to say, let's include everybody in that, and especially the widows and the orphans and the older people and the people that we should be helping. And I don't need to know who you are or your background or whether or not you're really in need, but if you look like the bags are heavy, let me stop and help you. Bless somebody. Bless somebody every day. You have an opportunity to bless somebody every single day. And we just blow right past it. And I want to encourage you to bless people. All right, I saw a hand. Chelsea.
I was just going to say that when Jennifer and I, when we backpacked Europe back in 2006, we arrived in Ireland and we didn't know that there was like a music festival going on. You know, we had this American thought that there would be hotels everywhere in the city. There was nothing. And we ended up stranded on a street.
Okay, let me just caution you. Her mom's sitting right there, and she doesn't even know. Oh, you reminded her? Okay. All right.
But we arrived in this town. We had taken a bus as far as we could, and it was like midnight. And we had our packs, and we looked homeless, and we had nowhere to go. I mean, there was literally no room at the inn. We had begged a hotel, could we just pay to sit in a chair in their lobby, and they refused us that. I mean, it was really. And so we prayed, and that God would send somebody, because we didn't know what to do. Like, we didn't know whether to stay in the city or whether to go to some park. We didn't know what to do. So anyway, a bus pulled up at like, I guess 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. I don't know. A bus pulled up with this like older gentleman in it, and he offered us a room at his house. And Jennifer thought it was nuts, but I had a piece about it, and we got in the bus, and he took us home and with his wife, and she made 2 beds for us and took care of us. And the following day, we had some trouble getting a bus to the place we were going, and she again drove by and saw us and put us in her car and drove us 2 hours to the next town. Wow! And it was an amazing testimony to what God can do, and we literally were born in their land. So it was really just something simple like that. It really impacted.
Well, it's a wonderful story because this whole series we've been doing for the last month and a half on journeys. The basic premise of the journey is if you know your destination, you can live your destiny. But if you're constantly fighting the battle all your life to get to a destination, your focus is only on the destination, and you miss your destiny. And so in the body of believers, if you know where you're going, and you know when you die you're going to be with Yeshua, you don't have to worry about how this all ends. Your destination is secure. Now you can flow in your destiny. And if your destiny is to be a disciple, because every one of you is a disciple, every one of you is called to a ministry of reconciliation. Anyone who's a Messiah is called as an ambassador of Messiah, personally, as if God were calling you individually, and He did. Then you're supposed to be a minister of reconciliation, to show Messiah in you in everything that you do, in everything you say. And if you know your destination is secure, you don't have to worry anymore about where you're going. You can just live your destiny. And it's a powerful, powerful message and a powerful series that we're doing. If you haven't heard it, get it online. Next week for Shavuot and Pentecost is a fascinating journey with Moses. And why both Shavuot and Pentecost are his prophetic and his fulfillment. And when we talk about Moses being a prophet, there's things that Moses spoke that came to pass in that upper room that people don't ever connect with Moses. They connect it with Peter, they connect it with Yeshua, but they miss the connection to Moses. And it was what he spoke that took place on that day. And so a very powerful journey with him. All right, you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you are strangers in the land. You shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. If you do mistreat them, I will heed their outcry as soon as they cry out to me, and my anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wives shall become widows, and your children orphans. What was that movie that Jim Carrey was in? About the God movie? Bruce Almighty. And what did he say? He said, "Smite me, you mighty smiter." Right? He said, "Come on, smite me, you mighty smiter." Well, this is the mighty smiter. Okay? And these are the things that touch God's heart. Now, it's just like many other scriptures. When you read this, you have to read the converse of this. So if you mistreat a widow and an orphan, what's the blessing to you if you treat them well? What's the blessing to you if you support them? Some of you have asked me questions like, well, why is Congregation Bethel Birmingham so blessed? Well, let's see. We take care of the widows and the orphans. 10% of everything that we bring in goes out either to benevolence or to missions. And our benevolence is to those who are in need, who are members of the congregation that are in need, and to the widows and orphans who are members of this congregation. Some get monthly support, some get annual support. This congregation is blessed because these are the scriptures that become the foundation of operating in a Bible-believing congregation that does the right thing every day. Hold on one second. Stop. Peggy?
I have a question. I've been taught in the past that where it says widow, a better translation is husbandless, and that so people that are single can claim that. Is that true or is that not true?
Well, Peggy, no. But as a single woman, I would just tell you that was a great question. I give you a lot of credit for trying. Okay? But in your need, we'll take care of you. Okay? No, Paul, a wifeless man is not a widower. Okay? I don't mean to cut you off, but I can anticipate these things coming up a mile away. Thanks, Peggy.
I was just saying that we, thinking about that, we often talk about the depth of God's grace and how we can't even comprehend that. Can we begin to even comprehend His anger in a situation like that?
Not at all.
It's...
You know, there's, I joke with you regularly that Amanda and Skylar and I and Laura would sit and watch television, and these commercials would come on and say, you can feed a family of 4 in Nigeria for $17 a month. And I'd say, kids, we're moving. But the truth of the matter is there's people all over the world. There's especially people in Israel. 60% of the Jewish population in Israel lives below the poverty line. Okay, through Congregation Beth Hallel and the Messianic Jewish Israel Fund, we support the widows and orphans in Israel, in the believing community. Don't think that because, the perception is, it's the Holy Land. Tel Aviv is a hotbed of crime. Tel Aviv is a hotbed of white slavery, of teenage women being bought and sold on a regular basis. The Russian mob is headquartered out of Tel Aviv. It's not such a holy land. It's a real live country with real live problems and real live poverty. And people who gave up their lives in their homeland, like in Russia, the former Soviet Union, Estonia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, left their homes, left the security of their home. And now the problem in Israel is reverse aliyah. Because of language problems, because of poverty, because they can't make a living there, they're wanting to return to their own home countries where they do have a native tongue, where they do have some skill that's recognized. Just because you are a doctor in Vladivostok doesn't mean you can be a doctor in Tel Aviv. And so a doctor in Tel Aviv or an engineer, we met an engineer from St. Petersburg who lives in Israel. He was a civil engineer, designed all the road systems within the former Soviet Union, the highway systems, their interstate system, and he can't get a job, so he waits tables because his credentials and his language skills aren't recognized in Israel. It's a problem. So Bethelel's commitment is to support the widows and the orphans through the Messianic Jewish Israel Fund and through direct work that we do with other ministries we support. And you get to meet those people as they come through to town. You know, you've met some of them and you'll meet more of them. That's what we do, not only just here in Birmingham within our own community, but also in Israel. Sure, there's Compassion International and you can adopt a child in the Philippines and things like that, but because our vision and our calling is to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and to the persecuted Jewish believers in the land, we support the widows and orphans there. And so if you want to participate in that, see me and we'll get you connected. And you know that's where Miss Laura is right now. Blair, you went with Miss Dottie 1 year as part of the MJIF to support that on the year that Laura didn't go because she went with me. Thank you. All right, it says, if you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, do not act toward them as a creditor, exact no interest from them. There's quite a story that you will hear about the financing of this congregation. Told you we received our funds from a private lender. A private lender. For no interest. Why? If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, do not act toward them as a creditor, exact no interest from them. Pretty fascinating testimony. 3-year-old congregation in Birmingham, Alabama. Gets a 44,000 square foot, 5.5 acre property. On a note. And the value of the note is 1/6. We own 5/6 of that property. We have a mortgage on 1/6 of the value of the property. And it's interest free. Now, is that a praise report? Amen. Amen. Why? Because it says so right here. No usury among God's people. You want to make a gift? Make a gift. If I lend you money and I don't charge you interest and you want to bless me at the end of the period of time and you want to give me something equivalent to or whatever you feel led to do, God bless you for that. But the contract you would sign with me would be for no interest because that's the way God tells us to do it. If you take your neighbor's garment and pledge, you must return it to him before the sun sets. It is his only clothing, the sole covering for his skin. In what else shall he sleep? Therefore, if he cries out to me, I will pay heed, for I am compassionate. Collateral. But collateral to the point of collecting on that collateral and putting somebody out on the street or leaving them naked or leaving them without food is not in God's economy. Title max. Title max, you give them the title of your car, you don't pay the bill, after a period of time, they'll come get your car. You will be carless. If you need your car to make a living, if you need your car for transportation, if you need your car to get from here to there, don't take your car title to title max. Because if you can't pay the bill and the usury on top of it, that $500 becomes $1,500 in about 2 or 3 weeks. Don't take your car because they'll take it from you. And you will go to sleep that night without a car. Don't put yourself in those kind of positions. You shall not revile God nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. Please don't curse me. Don't curse Obama. Don't curse leaders. Don't curse them. Bless them. Release them into God's hands. You have an issue with me, release me into God's hands. Let God deal with me. Let me tell you something. You can't smite me, but He can. Him taking me to the woodshed is a whole lot worse than you. His quarrel with me, he wins every time. You about 80-20. Maybe 90-10. You shall not put off the skimming of the first yield of your vats. You should give me the firstborn among your sons. You shall do the same with your cattle and your flocks. 7 days it shall remain with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. What does this mean? First fruits. Because we didn't get it, the Italian prophet Malachi, you know, Malachi, okay? Wasn't it Malachi? Okay. Malachi has a conversation with God about robbing God. He says, how do you rob God? He says, in tithes and offerings, first fruits. He says, don't withhold that from me. Don't withhold your children. So what happens on the 8th day? On the 8th day, a boy is circumcised. Don't withhold that from me. These things that belong to me belong to me. Don't take them from me. We have it all wrong. He created the heaven and the earth and all that was within it. It's all His. If He's the one that gave you the command and the instruction in the body to go be fruitful and multiply, to have dominion over the earth, to grow things for your food, and if He says, give the first tenth to me, give me first fruits, and you have the first fruits coming up, give me the first fruits, give me the best. Don't give me the tithe, give me the best. Give me the best you have to offer, the sweetest off the tree, the first off the tree. Don't withhold it from me. He says, you shall be holy people to me. You must not eat flesh torn by beasts in the field. You shall cast it to the dogs. Why? You defile your body with disease. Okay? Fear in the body, when the body dies, releases an enzyme into the body that spoils the meat. It's a biological, natural reaction to fear. Okay? The meat is defiled. Where's Dr. Don? Neither Dr. Don is here today. We usually have expert medical. Are you a doctor? Or you just play one on TV?
I have heard that because of the fear that animals have today that are big and things, because of the way they're handled, that they have fear.
That's why you should eat kosher meat. Kosher meat's killed by a shochet. Shochet is a certified rabbinical Jewish butcher who... How do you get that? Well, you go to Steve at Max's Delicatessen and you tell Steve you want to order kosher food. You can get it at the frozen food section at the Publix in Mountain Brook. And if you go to Bethel or Emmanuel in their front office, they have an order form, and they bring a truckload over from Atlanta every week or every other week. But there's plenty of kosher. I would say that probably 60% of the Jewish community in Birmingham keeps kosher. Maybe 70%. Even the people at Emmanuel and Bethel, Knesset Israel, and Chabad all buy their meat that way. So eventually, if enough people, but remember, there's only 5,000 Jewish people in Birmingham. So even if all 5,000 said we want to place an order, it's not enough to open up a store to get a kosher butcher here. But they bring it in from Atlanta, and they bring it in a bit weekly.
There's a lot of it up in Coleman, too. Where we are, where our farm is, you can just get gently raised, family raised beef, grass-fed, and you just go up, you pick it up there at the butcher shop, and it's been taken care of.
Yeah, they'll give you a picture of it. And a name.
Yeah.
All right, Chelsea.
I have a question about verse 19, 20.
19 and 20?
Well, it depends on which translation.
Okay.
The one that says, anyone who sacrifices to any god other than Adonai alone is to be
Mm-hmm.
I guess lately I've just been more sensitive to entering establishments that have, altars in them to other gods. And I just had a question about, I guess, how do we treat that? Like, we go to a nail shop who has, we have a client who is Hindu and has, like little Asherah things all over their house. And there's a certain element of, God gives me divine appointments sometimes to go in and to talk to people. But there's also an element of, do you support that establishment if that's the basis of what they think prosperity is coming from? Like, do we eat at Surin when there's a giant Hindu goddess in the front? Do I...
It's a very good question, and as we read Scripture, and it says, judge not lest you be judged, by the same measure you judge another, so you shall be judged. So should they not shop from you because you wear a Star of David, or should they not shop from you because you have you're a believing establishment? I never, walking into a store that had a crucifix or it never really bothered me. I never felt like I was soiled by that. not coming from that and not having to live with that. We have people here who come from other cultures and other countries who were raised Buddhist or raised, and if they are willing to speak up about their experience, that would be appreciated. I know that we go into many shops. We're a very diverse community, and whether or not and I think that comes down to personal choice. Do you participate in it? Do you pay homage to that Buddha when you walk in? Do you bow to it? Do you kneel? And if you don't, then is the great commission, the great omission, let's go bring the gospel to everybody except those that have a Buddha in their lobby. Let's bring the gospel to everybody except those that have a Star of David. Let's go bring the gospel to everybody except those that have, we keep coming back to who are you to be, not what are you to say. And so if I walk into that store and I build a relationship, and actually we have somebody in the congregation here that's introduced me to a restaurant very close to my office, that I now am a regular customer. Okay? And we'll have an opportunity to share with them over time, because lately, because I'm in the office so much, I run out of the office without thinking. I wear a kippah in the office. When I'm on the property, I wear a kippah. And I'll run out the door without thinking about it and walk into the restaurant with a kippah on, or walk into a store, not even thinking about it. It's just, and I normally don't. I do it out of reverence in God's house, but don't wear it as a public declaration. It's not the way I was raised. And in Corinthians, it tells you whatever your condition was when you came to the Lord, maintain that condition. So I wasn't Orthodox before, and I'm not Orthodox now. And so I'm the same as I was when I cover my head when I go into the sanctuary or into God's house, but that's it. But I wind up now out in public a little bit more often forgetting, and I'll walk into a store and then I'll realize, I'll turn my head or I'll catch it and I'll go, oh, and I'll remove it. But they're going to see it eventually and probably ask a question or make a comment, which is good because I want to encourage that. It's as much for provocation now as anything else. Same reason why many of you who are not Jewish say, I want to wear a Star of David, and I'll ask you why. I want to start wearing a kippah and a tallit, and I ask you why. Okay? I want to check the condition of your heart. Okay? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you want to be Jewish? Well, don't. Okay? Are you doing it because you want to weigh into what God's called you to? Great. Okay, do you have a ready answer? If a Holocaust survivor walks in the door and you're wearing a kippah and a tallit, and he says to you, are you Jewish? And you say no, and he says to you, then why are you wearing that? You better have a good, solid answer. He's going to walk away offended. When you walk down the street, you walk into a store and you're wearing a Star of David, and they say to you, are you Jewish? And you say no, and they say to you, why are you wearing that then? You better have a ready answer. Otherwise, you're going to offend somebody. It's not offensive to me. I think I know your heart, but I ask you that question to prepare you to give a ready answer for your faith in the Jewish Messiah, for a belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that you stand with God's people, and that you're not there to replace them, but you're there to weigh in and support and encourage, and that you're grafted in through the promised Jewish Messiah. And they say, well, who's the Jewish Messiah? And you tell them, Yeshua, Jesus. And you'll tell them something that I didn't know for 42 years of my life, that other people didn't know until their 50s, that he was the Jewish Messiah. He wasn't just the Christian Messiah. He wasn't the God of the Gentiles. He was God. He was God incarnate. He was God walking this earth in the form of a man, okay, so that we would know. And so if you have a ready answer, and the Word of God tells you, have a ready answer to be able to explain the faith that you have. So if you can't explain why you believe in Yeshua, you can have a really hard time explaining why you don't look Jewish, but you're wearing a Star of David. And so for that same reason, I would probably say it's not, I get a hitch in my spirit too, okay, when I walk into places, okay? But be prayed up. If you walk out of the house, when it talks about, how many of you have seen Iron Man 2? Oh, yeah. Okay, good, isn't it? All right. How many of you remember Superman? Superman would walk into a telephone booth, and what would happen? Change clothes. Okay, so what's putting on the armor of God? Do I need to sit there and say, all right, I'm going to put on the armor of God? Start with the helmet of, okay? No, it's instantaneous. If I say I put on the whole armor of God, you're dressed, okay? If you're walking out in public naked, If you're walking out without the full armor of God, those kind of situations are going to jump on you. Don't walk into those restaurants or those stores naked, uncovered. Be covered. And then it doesn't get on you. But if you're defenseless because you didn't put on the armor of God, something's going to pierce you, and then we've got to deal with it. So get dressed in the morning. Don't come to synagogue naked. No. You may not. You may not. Yes, Ken. Star of David was it's been used for a lot of years in various situations, but the Magen David now has become a symbol of Israel. I think in the last 300 years, it's a very modern symbol. It's been adopted as a modern symbol, but it was satanic. It was part of the pentagram, and many cultures used it in emblems. We see it all over the Middle East. You see it all over Spain and Sephardic cultures as on buildings and on instruments and things like that, not related to Israel at all. But it's been adopted as a national emblem.
It came later after. Well, he wasn't David that started it.
No, it was, they call it the Magen David, the shield of David. Yeah, right, Magen David. Yeah, Magen.
But George Washington's headquarters flag had 6-pointed stars on it.
Yeah, and the dollar bill, and I mean, there's many things that have the star all over it. Star has been used symbolic of God and the stars, and so there's been from every aspect of astrology and astronomy to something in the heavenlies as representative of the heavenlies. But it's a very modern. I get that question a lot, and I just send them to it's jewishfaq.com. Jewish frequently asked questions, and I just always refer to it. The history of the Magen David, it's been given many different historical, many different opinions of what it is, but it is not a religious, there's no biblical foundation for it. It was adopted, just like the Stars and Stripes were adopted by America.
This symbol was actually found. Is it true that this symbol is from 2,000 years ago? Or not?
I have no idea. Yeah, don't really know. I don't think that the Magen David is 2,000 years old. Could be. Anybody have an iPhone with the internet, just go up to Wikipedia and put in Star of David and read it and hope that whoever did it wasn't wrong. I like to go to the experts, so if anybody was there at the time of the selection of the Star of David as being it, I would love to hear your firsthand testimony, but other than that, because it's not found within the text of the Bible as being a symbol, then it becomes purely archaeological in origin and certainly subject to lack of verification. I don't remember, and I can't quote Josephus, but whether or not it was in use at that time. But certainly it's researchable, but like anything else, whatever the oldest piece of evidence that they have has been time-stamped by man. So is it considered to be something that we all recognize it like any recognizable symbol? We recognize good symbols and bad symbols. Icons. I mean, the cross itself wasn't even allowed in a church for the first 200 or 300 years because it was an offense. So it's become an icon of Christianity, but the truth of the matter was it wasn't in the first churches because it was prohibited from being brought in. Okay? So now we look at a cross and we say Christianity. Okay, we look at a Star of David, we say Jewish. Okay? We look at a Star of David with a cross inside and we say confused.
So was the fish a symbol or not?
Well, the fish was found the fish is definitely a symbol of the fish and loaves. Okay, but that was about the miracle of the fish and the loaves. Okay, whether or not it was actually integrated as, when did the fish and loaves become a symbol of Christianity is really the question. And when are they saying that Christianity and Judaism merged to become the messianic symbol? And to be honest with you, I don't particularly like it. From an iconic standpoint, I don't find it to be a witness. I find a pure Star of David to be the strongest witness that a non-Jewish person can have if they're going to be out in public, that it's not iconic to something that introduces Christianity into the picture, but it begs the question, are you Jewish? And you now have the opportunity to share, no. Don't say, well, I'm grafted in. Okay? Right? Because, so is a patch of skin after surgery. Okay? There's just, the grafted in concept is a beautiful thing from a scriptural perspective. It means a great deal to you who are grafted in, means nothing to a Jewish person. Okay? It's not a witness. I'm not grafted in. Oh, you mean you're taking what belongs to us? It's not Jewish terminology. Okay? Star of David says, are you Jewish? No, but I stand with Israel. Now they say, God bless you. No, but I wear it so you'll ask me about Jesus. Yeah, well, no, that's an agenda. Okay? That's why I always ask you, why do you wear it? Okay? If I wear it because I want to deceive Jewish people so that they'll ask me so I can tell them about Jesus, I'm going to tell you, don't wear it. If you wear it because you love God and because you love the people of Israel and you stand with Israel and God's people, say so. And keep all the other agenda and the door-opening tactics. Okay? The greatest witness that we have in Birmingham, Alabama is that we exist. Never forget, the greatest witness we have in Birmingham, Alabama is this room is full at 10:30 on a Saturday morning. Got to add chairs. And every week we have to add chairs. Greatest witness in Birmingham, Alabama is that we exist. The greatest witness in Birmingham, Alabama is the large sign at the bottom of the street, 82 feet higher than the crescent moon flies in Birmingham, Alabama. And how many hundreds, even thousands of people drive by it every day to see it. The greatest sign we have is established. Okay? So any kind of provocative technique that you want to incorporate, okay, only goes further to deception. We've been deceived enough. Jewish people have been deceived enough. It's time to stop the games, okay, and get down to the business of being the light, not talking about the light, about being an ambassador to Messiah as opposed to talking about Messiah. When you are profoundly different than everybody else in the workplace, and they ask you the question, why are you so different? What is it about you that's so different? You can say to them what I say to them. Do you really want to know? If you really want to know, I'll tell you. But if you don't want to know, don't ask me. Because once I start telling you, I'm not going to stop. So if you really want to know, I'll be happy to tell you why. But other than that, just stay out of it. Well, of course, human nature is they're going to push you until you tell them. Okay? And then you have the opportunity. And they can't be offended because they asked you. Now, is that subtle evangelism? It is. But we're not a proselytizing group. We're not an evangelical kind of outward. When you take a look at the calling on the Jewish people were set apart so that man would come to God. Evangelical Christianity was birthed out of go, bring God to man. Whole different model. Synagogues don't proselytize. Synagogues don't evangelize. Synagogues exist. We build edifices and buildings and we bring a gathering place that people come to. We don't go to the people. People come to synagogues. Synagogue doesn't go to the people. We don't have tent meetings and tent revivals. The synagogue is established. It's established, 4 walls, established. And it is there, it is unmovable, and it's unshakable. For 125 years, the 2 synagogues have lived downtown in Birmingham. Unmovable, unshakable. And if you want to know about Jewish tradition, that's where you go. You go to them. They don't come to you. You don't hear about Jewish mission trips going out to Nigeria to evangelize the Nigerians to convert them to Judaism, because that wasn't the calling on the Jewish people. The calling on the Jewish people were to be set apart, to establish your communities, and if somebody wanted to connect in, they'd come to you. Now, Yeshua said, go, make disciples of men. That became evangelical Christianity. Evangelical Judaism, if you will. Because you had a world that knew nothing about the set apart. You had a world that knew nothing about the tabernacle. You had a world that knew nothing about the temple in Israel. You had a world that knew nothing about this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you had to go out and tell them about it. And the great work of Messiah Yeshua. But people got so enamored with the Son, they forgot about the Father. And everything became all about Jesus, all about Yeshua, all about Yeshua, all about Yeshua, and everybody forgot about the Father. And even Yeshua always said, he never said, I'm about my business. He said, I'm about my Father's business. Everything he said had to do with the Father. No one comes to the Father but through me. If you know me, you know my Father. If you hear me, you hear my Father. Everything was back to the Father because God was calling us back to him. And now we go back to him through Messiah Yeshua. And so it's a very foundational concept of who the Jewish people are. So going out there to evangelize, sure, Jews for Jesus works to a certain extent, but then what? Okay, so I witnessed to you on the street, you said yes, and now you go back to your daily life and nothing changes because there's nobody there to work with you, nobody there to talk with you. And it's a great outreach, okay, as long as they plant and as long as they raise up. But you have to connect in. You have to adopt a lifestyle. You have to become a part of a kahilot in a community, and that's what this is about, community building. And that was the model of Acts chapter 2. They met together daily in the courtyard of the temple. When you leave here today, you'll go see the courtyard of the temple. It's pretty amazing what God has done here. That we have a courtyard right outside the temple, that we will meet in and eat in and fellowship in and pray together in that courtyard. Because that's what God saw, that was the vision that we had for Birmingham, was to establish in Acts chapter 2 in the courtyard daily. Many of you have gathered in the courtyard. If you come to my office, you have to come to the courtyard because my office is in the courtyard. And I look out through my window in the courtyard. It's pretty amazing what God has done because this is what I've preached ever since we got here, was the model of Acts chapter 2. So it's a foundational understanding of what do you do when you walk into that place. You want to walk into that place wearing a Star of David and they ask you, what is it? Great. But they also have really great food, so please don't pick on Surin. Chelsea, you're going to have to find somebody else to pick on. Don't pick on some of my favorite restaurants. All right, other questions? We're at the 11:45 hour, and I promised to finish in time for us to get cars moved and to allow the truck to come in. So, Molly.
I'm just really curious which verse it is in Corinthians that you said, Paul, when he said to continue, whatever, however you pray, to continue.
Is it 1 Corinthians? Oh, I can't look at this one, but look up 1 Corinthians 17. Chapter 17, is it? Nathan, where is it?
Well, I didn't hear the question.
The question is when Paul talks about in the letter to the Corinthians, he said, whatever your condition was when you came to the Lord, maintain that position. If you were circumcised, remain circumcised. If you were uncircumcised, don't get circumcised.
I don't have that.
You don't have that one?
I can't believe that.
That's all right, Nathan. It's all right. Got a lot of other ones, but not that one.
Well, on the same subject, Paul also said, I will be all things to all people so that some may be saved.
That's right.
It's the same thing about going in these different establishments.
That's exactly right.
Don't lose your identity, but be aware of all that's out there.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, there's our truck. All right. Great timing. 1 Corinthians 7:20. Will you read it?
Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. You being a servant, care not for it, but if thou callest, mayest be free, use it rather. For he that is called in the Lord being a servant is the Lord's free man, likewise also who is called being free is Christ's servant. The above of Christ, be not ye the servants of men, brethren, let every man wherein he is called therein abide with God.
So whatever condition you were in when you came to the Lord, maintain that condition. If you're Orthodox, stay Orthodox. If you weren't Orthodox, don't become Orthodox.
If I'm understanding this right, that means I shouldn't be here. Because if I was joined the Baptist church when I got saved, I should stay with it.
At the time of the writing, there was no Baptist church. Coming to the Lord meant you weighed into this. You didn't weigh into that and come to this. Okay?
But there was no conservative either.
What's that?
There was no conservative Judaism either.
That's correct.
There would have only been Orthodox.
So whatever your practice is, if you celebrate Christmas, celebrate Christmas. Okay, nobody's asked you to give up Christmas. Nobody's asked you to give up Easter. You can't celebrate it here, but you have plenty of places to go celebrate it. You do love bunnies? Well, there you go. I think we established the fact that it was the bunny of God, not the Lamb of God, because I told you. It was because I went to Green Springs, Green Springs Drugstore, Green Valley Drugstore, okay? And when you walk in, they said all Easter products 75% off. So I went over there and I took 2 lambs off the Easter counter and I went and said, how much are these? And they said, well, they're $14 each. I said, I thought they were 75% off. And they said, no, that's not an Easter product. I said, oh, so it's the bunny. And they said, yes, all the bunnies. I said, so it was the bunny of God. Behold, the bunny of God that comes to take away the sins of the world. So on the 3rd day, the bunny of God was raised. Well, now I understand what an Easter product's all about. So they wouldn't sell it to me at 75% off. Do you?
Yes, I do.
The bunny of God who comes to, and that's why the egg is such an important part of the Passover service. And it's why you put the blood of the egg on the doorpost of your house. All right, well, let's close in a word of prayer. I'm going to take everybody's prayer.